Hotep, welcome to Journey in the Self. I'm your host, Sarah. Our topic for today is the University of Life. As I was contemplating what the subject of tonight's talk would be, I was reminded of the fact that part of my daily prayer includes a request for Spirit to God to always help me to maintain my focus, that I do not identify myself with my ego self and fall prey to any egoic desires, and also to not allow myself to be distracted by the lures and attractions of the Maya, the illusion, the impermanent but physical universe. So as I was contemplating the subject, I reflected on the fact that there's so many things right now that are going on that can be a distraction to us, so much so that we lose sight of the true purpose of our spiritual journey. We lose sight of who we are and what we're ultimately here to do. We lose sight of the fact that we are eternal spirit, and then we begin to just get caught up in our identification with our physical bodies, our minds, our senses, our emotions, and so we start confusing that with being who we actually are. And so the purpose of spirituality is for us to transcend that identification. So we've been doing a number of stories or series of shows on Trump, and there is plenty to talk about in that realm. There are a number of things going on that are worthy of discussion, but I wanted to get away from that today because, again, the more we allow ourselves to get caught up in that, we lose sight of the truth of our existence. We begin to identify with that and get caught up in the emotional turmoil that those things can bring, that thinking about those things can bring by dealing with the fallout of what those things can bring. And they can create, great disturbance in our consciousness and awareness. So I wanted to just kind of bring us back on the spiritual side of things, not to look at spirituality as being an escape, but to bring into focus that it is spirit in the spiritual realm, which is the true reality. And so as we are both having the human physical experience while we are spirit beings inhabiting a physical body, that we maintain a dual awareness and not end up being focused on primarily on one or the other. Right. So part of the purpose of spirituality is for us to be able to integrate the spiritual knowledge into our physical existence so that we can have a more peaceful experience, because we know when we're identified with our spiritual self that we are beyond all of this that's going on in the physical realm, and that we can control how we respond to it. The other thing that came into my awareness as I was contemplating the show, and this often occurs when I go into contemplation and meditation about what the topic of the show is going to be. And that was, I'll pay attention to themes that tend to come up in my conversations with people and my interactions with people, or if common themes end up coming up in the counseling sessions that I have with people, it then compels me to want to share these things because they seem to be important in that they recur. And so that ends up being kind of like a message to highlight that particular principle that others can benefit from. So I was counseling a brother who sought me out, and I recall during the conversation, as I was sharing some insights with him, that he expressed to me that, man, brother Sarah, I wish that I had known this information, that I had heard this information earlier in my life. And my response to him was, no, you don't. And I made the point to not ever regret anything that has occurred in our life. All is in divine order. And I pointed out that had he gotten the information back when he was younger, that he wouldn't have been ready for it then. And that sometimes and often it takes us to have the time of experience in order to be able to put things into context and to give us a contrast such that when we receive a spiritual principle, because we have gone through certain experiences, it becomes more real. We can better identify it. We can see the truth in it. because of what we've lived. And so I pointed out to him that it's like the university of life, that life is like a university for us. And I pointed out to him that when we're taking a class in a university, that we will be given lessons for us to study. We're given a curriculum. We're given books to read. We listen to lectures. We take notes. We do research. But then at some point, the professor, the instructor, needs to determine how much that information we've absorbed, whether we've been able to really grasp and digest the information that's been imparted to us. And so I asked him, well, what is that when that occurs? And he thought about it for a minute. And then finally he realized, oh, we're given a test. I pointed out that life operates in the same manner, that in the same way that we receive lessons from the instructor, we're given reading assignments, we might be given a lab assignment where we're to observe certain phenomena. In life, we receive lectures from various people, from our parents, from other authorities in our lives, spiritual teachers. We'll read books. We'll take in a number of a volume of information. But just as it is with the university, there's a point where we're given a test. Just like the university does. And I'm just noticing the correlation, the universe and university. And there's probably that's probably not a coincidence. Just as it is in the university, the universe gives us tests for the same purpose, to evaluate whether we've learned the lesson, that we've truly absorbed the lesson, that we understand the lesson and are able to integrate the lesson that we've absorbed into our lives. Just as it is in the university, we get grades, we determine whether we've passed or failed. In the same way, in the universe or the university of life, we are given a pass or fail grade based on how we responded or reacted when we were undergoing the test. Were we able to apply what we've learned effectively? Or did we fail because we didn't apply it? And we'll notice the failure uh, based upon the consequences, right? So I mentioned that everything is in divine order. Nothing is happenstance. There's no chance, as the Funkadelic song Good Thoughts, Bad Thoughts says. There is no chance, coincidence, or accident in a world ruled by law and divine order. So everything happens for a reason. There's a purpose for everything. And so it's incumbent for us to be able to have the awareness to be able to reflect on and observe life, because there's a lesson in every experience that we have. There's a lesson in every interaction that we have with people. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for why people in our lives are people are in our lives at a certain moment. There's a reason for why we find ourselves in certain circumstances. There's a reason for why we may be repeating certain patterns. And so it is for us to understand what the purpose, what the meaning of it is. What is it that we are meant to learn from that experience? What is it that we're meant to learn from that interaction with that person? What are we supposed to learn from when we find ourselves continuously repeating the same patterns? What is it that we need to change? I recently gave a talk at a local spiritual center, and the purpose or the title of the talk was Know Thyself. And I pointed out that those two words, know thyself, are the embodiment of the spiritual teachings. If you were to break down the purpose of all spiritual teachings throughout the world in just two words, those two words would be know thyself. That is the purpose of all spiritual teachings. And so by observing ourselves, by observing life, we gain deeper insight into ourselves. We are able to discern what the purpose of us being in a certain situation is. We're able to figure out, why am I having this interaction with this person? What am I supposed to get from this? And if we found ourselves reacting in an adverse way, why did I react that way? What was being triggered within me, and why was I being triggered? At the root of those triggers are attachments. And so part of the process of our life and our spiritual journey is to be able to transcend, slowly transcend the attachments. Another thing I was sharing with the brother was that many people reject religion under the auspices of it being created to control and manipulate people. That it was created by Europeans to control us, to control others, which is false. That's not what religion was created for. It became co opted and used for that purpose, but that was not why it was created. Religion is the profane aspect of spirituality. The religious and the profane aspect was meant to instill discipline. So it contains admonitions that instill in us the discipline to avoid things that would lead us into attachment. So we had the 42 confessions of innocence. And there's actually more than 42. But we had confessions of innocence, which then ended up being transformed into commandments. There's more than 10, of course, as well. And some of those commandments were for us to avoid certain things. And the reason for us to avoid certain things was so that we would not fall into attachment, because the purpose of religion is to reunite us with our spiritual self, our spiritual consciousness, to reawaken our knowledge, of who we truly are and to reestablish that connection in our consciousness. But that process becomes more difficult when we're attached to things in the physical realm. Even when we're attached to our own minds, our own bodies, our senses, when we develop likes and dislikes, when we get caught up in the belief that our physical and emotional body is who we are. So experience, the life experience, is to put things into perspective for us and show us what ends up happening if we fail to adhere to the admonitions that are contained in the negative confessions or the commandments. And so that was part of the reason why I shared with the brother that it really wouldn't have mattered whether he had received the information at an earlier point in time, because it's likely that he wouldn't have been prepared at that time to receive it. All is in divine order. We should receive the information when we're ready for it. That's why in the ancient wisdom says when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And the universe gives us insights when we're ready for them, not before. That's why we have certain experiences at certain times. That's why we get information when we do. We weren't ready for it earlier. And I can speak to that from my own personal experience. You know, I remember, and this was probably about, say, 30 years ago, when our brother Daidisi Sangika, one of my teachers, was still in body. And he was trying to impart to me, some spiritual insights, and basically some of the things that I'm talking about right now. Uh, he was sharing with me, and I clearly was not ready for it then. I was up in my late 20s, and I thought that I needed to go out and enjoy life, uh, make money, right? Uh, Accumulate wealth, have things, you know, and then I'll get into spirituality, right? Which brings into awareness, or brings to mind the spiritual. I think it's a scripture from the Bible that says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and then all these things would be added unto you." And that is the proper sequence. Why is that? It's because if we seek the things, if we seek the pleasures of the world before we seek God, then it becomes more difficult for us to begin the process of seeking God if we ever get there. It delays that journey into ourselves because by pursuing the the things, the pleasures of the world, then we become attached to them. We are deluded into thinking that they will bring us happiness. And so that actually provides us with the contrast in order for us to be able to see the truth in the teachings. Ideally, we would take it on faith because we trust the person that's imparting the knowledge to us. But we have a choice. We make choices. My choice was I wasn't ready to go straight down the spiritual path at the time. Uh, I wanted to experience, what the world had, and I was under the delusion that those things would, bring some happiness. So I wanted to enjoy that. I wasn't ready for the teachings. I didn't understand. So I did that. Uh, I developed attachments, and I found just what most people end up finding that one, the experience of those things don't lead to happiness. The accumulation of things and wealth don't lead to happiness. The satisfaction of sensory desires don't lead to happiness. They create deeper attachments, deeper desires. And when they're not fulfilled, it brings agitation, anger, depression, sadness, anxiety. If we get it, we're afraid to lose it. We lose peace. If it's a sensory thing, uh, we want to experience it more, so we're detached, and our minds are constantly thinking it. We thinking about it. When can we experience it again? We get frustrated if we can't. We get attached to people, and then when they leave, we're devastated. We lose or don't realize that everything in the physical world is impermanent, is subject to change. It's not going to stay. And so we're attached to them. That includes people. And so when we're attached to things, we're putting ourselves in bondage. We're creating the circumstances for our own suffering. But we don't realize that at the time, particularly when we're younger. We've been indoctrinated into believing that happiness comes from the accumulation of things. We see these commercials on television every day and hear them every day. You know, if you just if you have this, you'll be happy. You have attractive people around you. You'll live the good life. Right? It'll bring you so much joy and happiness. But that's a delusion. It doesn't bring us happiness. We may have some temporary happiness from it, but it doesn't last. And, you know, often, if not always, ultimately ends up leading into into suffering. But sometimes, and most of the time, is unless we've received spiritual teachings, which typically isn't the case for most of us here, particularly in what is considered the Western world, we haven't learned these spiritual principles from an early age. And so we end up needing to have the experience of pursuing the impermanent by chasing after the pleasures of the world, by chasing after things, by thinking that we'll find happiness in a relationship and we just find that right person. We need to go through it and have the experience of what actually happens when we get attached to those things. We need to experience the suffering. So then, after having gone through that, repeating certain patterns, getting the same results, suffering as a result, we get into these different things and realizing that it's not bringing us happiness. We notice how we continue to to suffer. Uh, then we get to where the spiritual teachings make more sense. So when we read about the confessions of innocence, the commandments, when we read about how uh, attachments lead to suffering and pain, when we read that the pursuit of physical things, s- sensual pleasures, leads to suffering and pain, when we see that placing our hopes in finding happiness through those things, through things like relationships or accumulating physical things, when we read that those things lead to suffering, now we have the experience to contemplate on that and reflect on it. And, well, man, you know, that's actually right. That's how I feel. That's what's happened to me. I thought these things were going to bring me happiness, but I'm just miserable now. That makes sense. That's right. That's on point because we experienced it. And so the truth of the teachings become more apparent, more real, because we realize the truth of it from our experience. We didn't have that perspective when we were younger. We didn't have any experience to draw from. We couldn't relate to it. So I told her, brother, don't lament or feel bad about the fact that he didn't get these teachings earlier in his life. Don't have any regrets. You weren't ready for it then. It wouldn't have mattered whether you gotten it then or not. You wouldn't have accepted it. And so we end up observing life. When we have the awareness to observe life as we're taking in the spiritual teachings, we can see the truth in them because we can identify it from our own experience. We can relate to it. When we reflect, we can identify the purpose of those situations that we found ourselves in. Why did we have that experience? It becomes revealed to us. That's what I was supposed to learn from that. I needed to have that experience in order to learn from it. Even if it was painful to us at the time, we learned from it. And sometimes pain is a great motivator. It's a great wake up call. Because when we experience pain, we want to learn how to avoid it. We want to understand it. Ideally, we don't want to have that experience again. But if we really truly want to get at the core of why we felt that pain, then we have to go deep within ourselves to understand the nature of the attachment, to understand that we have an attachment, to understand where the attachment came from. And when we are able to identify the root of it, we can pull that root out such that it no longer has a hold on us. We're no longer triggered. We can be at peace as we encounter that same situation again. Because we're no longer affected by it. We pulled up the root of attachment. We've learned how to detach through our meditation. We've learned how to apply the principles of meditation to our lives in such a way that life becomes for us a waking meditation. We're observing life as we're experiencing life in the same way that we're observing our thoughts as we're meditating. We realize that the thoughts are not real. They're not ours. They don't belong to us. They're just there. They're an illusion. In the same way, everything in the physical world is an illusion. It's not reality. So there's nothing that we can gain in terms of permanent satisfaction from them. Because they're always changing. They're always going to come and go. They're not real. And so when we're able to let go of them, to detach from them, just as we detach from our thoughts in our meditation, we can be at peace. We're not affected by the coming and going of things. We're not affected by the coming and going of people in our lives. They're not ours. People are not ours. Things are not ours. They're not even real. So what difference does it make? Because we are permanent spirit. We are whether those things are not, and they are not. We are eternal bliss. The only thing that prevents us from remaining in that state of bliss is our identification with our false self. with our attachments to the physical world, the things in the physical world. From including our thoughts, identifying with them, making them ours, allowing them to control us and take us over, allowing them to affect our emotional state and identifying with our emotional state. Emotions don't belong to us. Emotions are meant to be tools for us to use in certain circumstances as appropriate. Like my spiritual teacher, my spiritual master Amma, tells us that we should be able to wear our emotions like clothes. To choose the right clothes for the right situations, circumstances, or weather. We should be able to choose the right emotion for the right situation. We inhabit our bodies. Our bodies are not us, but just as it is that we live in a house, it's more comfortable if we keep our house clean, right? So, yeah, it's more we'll have a better experience if we keep our bodies in good shape and stay healthy. But that's not who we are. It doesn't dictate our happiness. But we'll find it easier to concentrate and meditate the better we feel physically. We don't want to be distracted by being in poor health. It's harder to meditate and concentrate when we're suffering physically. But again, that's not the physical part of us, is not who we are any more than we could say that when we get in our car is not us. It's just a vehicle that gets us where we need to go. Our bodies are the vehicles through which we navigate this physical realm, but it's not who we are. So there's great wisdom that we can gain from our experience in the university of life. We can gain deeper insight into ourselves. We can even gain some deeper insight into others. That's again, that's not the primary goal. Our primary goal is to know ourselves. And we can see the rationale for why we have certain experiences, why we have certain people come in our lives. What will we to benefit from in terms of that experience? We may, again, it may not be as we're going through it, something that we consider to be comfortable. We may not even like it. But when we're able to step back and take ourselves out of it, we can see what the ultimate benefit is to us, what the lesson is, how we can apply it to our lives. in the current moment. Notice the things that we should avoid because we've reflected upon those things and noticed that when we've done certain things, it ended up leading us to a place where we didn't want to be. And so we retrace those steps. So we learn from our so called failures what things to avoid so that we don't repeat that situation. We learn to make better choices because we always are making choices about everything. Everything, every moment we're making a choice. Every thought that we allow into our consciousness is a choice. Every action that we take is a choice. No one's making us do anything. Nothing's making us do anything. We have a choice. The only distinction is we make our choices either consciously or we make them unconsciously, but we're making a choice. We want to develop the ability to be more conscious of our choices and make choices that are consistent with bringing about our liberation and helping us to realign ourselves with the eternal spirit. So, by so doing, we will graduate from the University of Life by attaining eternal liberation. It may take us to go through a repeat of school or to graduate on to other schools until we no longer have to go to school, which is the ultimate state of liberation, the ultimate graduation, is graduation into eternal consciousness. So, with that, I will end. I hope you found this beneficial and enlightening for you. There's a lot to think about. Do watch this to be on my YouTube channel for you to review and continue to watch. And as you do so, you'll gain some and contemplate on it. You'll gain some deeper insights. It was interesting and enlightening for me to listen to myself as well as this knowledge was coming through, and so I'll benefit from it as well. But please do listen uh, and take in the knowledge and put it into practice. Sister or brother Hobbit Pineapple comments that this is a delicious treat. Grateful for your powerful teacher presence. We are indeed enrolled in the University of Life. All right, so thank you for that. I'm grateful and appreciative that this has been beneficial. And I'll just say before we go, I do provide spiritual and relationship counseling. So if you are interested in that, do reach out to me either by Facebook Messenger, or you may go to my website, which is www.sa-ra.org, and sign up for a free session with me. And from there, we can determine whether we're the right fit and how I can better serve you. All right. So thanks for tuning in to Journey in the Self, and we'll see you here next time. Hotel.